Hi, everyone. It's Marilyn Allori, and welcome to Who Can It Be Now? And today, I know I say this when I have guests, but I'm really, really excited about who I'm going to be talking to today. This is somebody you always hear me talking about tennis, right? So this is one of the people I like on the tennis courts. And and I'm very impressed by her. So her name is Gennifer Choldenko, and she's an author. And we're going to be talking about how she made the transition from her career as a graphic artist to becoming an author. And I recently went to her most recent book launch. I meant to have the book in my hand, and her most recent book launch. And I'm always so impressed by her anyway, when I listen to her about her life and just how she lives her life and everything. And I've been to her house and know about her. But when I heard her story and people were asking her questions about her writing style, I was like, oh, I really want to interview her and bring her to all of you. Because what I find in my audience, I hate to say audience, the people that listen to me, they really are looking for their passion career. And I'm helping more and more people every single day to leave a career that's already been successful to do their mission-driven work. And I felt like bringing Gennifer on and having her talk about her own way of doing it, her own journey, and also talking about the incredible success she's had with her books, I thought would be really inspiring for all of you. So I am going to read a formal bio, but I wanted to tell you that that's how I know her. And this way you can get to know her more and definitely check out her book. So Gennifer Choldenko, with more than 2.5 million books sold, Choldenko's best-known Tales for Alcatraz series has been called a cornerstone series in contemporary children's literature. Al Capone Does My Shirts, the first book in the series, was a Newbery Honor book and the recipient of 20 other awards. All 4 books in the series were Junior Library Guild selections and garnered many starred reviews. Gennifer's newest novel, The 10th Mistake of Hank Hooperman, which I love the story of how this was created, will be out in June. Booklist wrote in a starred review, from the first line of Hank's engaging first-person narrative to the last, he comes across as a reliable, sensible boy who is aware that his options are few and is determined to make the right choices. Choldenko speaks from the heart in the compelling story of Hank and Boo's found family. Gennifer lives in San Francisco Bay Area with her loyal husband and naughty dog. Hi, Gennifer.
Hi. Could I just start out with a couple of just quick changes? The 10th Mistake of Hank Hooperman is already out because it is now the end of June.
Yes.
And I wasn't a graphic designer. I was a copywriter. I wrote advertising copy.
Oh, I love that. So do that throughout it, because people are so used to me just being very scrappy, and you're used to me being scrappy on the court. So you know how I am.
Sure.
And thank you for sharing that. Can you take me back, show your book again so everybody can see it?
Okay, I'm actually going to show this.
And show Dogtown too, if you want.
Well, Dogtown, these are both out. The second Dogtown is coming out in September, and I don't have an arc for that yet, which is an advanced reader copy.
And then the 10th Mistake of Hank Hooperman is out now.
Right.
So take us back to the moment when you started realizing that I want to know what was happening in your career as a copywriter, that you were deciding that something had to change, something had to shift.
Well, what happened was I am the kind of person that doesn't procrastinate. I know that's unusual, but I mean, I'm on it right away. I got a job, I do it. That is just who I am. But I began to hate writing advertising copy because it required so much creative energy, believe it or not, it really does. And I was trying to convince people to take a second mortgage on their house. I was trying to sell, a fundraiser, for people that were hearing impaired. I was trying to sell, and using my creative energy to do that. And I just couldn't do it after a while. I mean, I did it for about 7 years. So after a while, it took a while.
Yeah.
But I found that I started toward the end, I was freelancing, and I found that I would have to get up earlier and earlier and earlier to make my deadlines because I hadn't done the work the day before. So at first it was like 3 in the morning, and then it was 2 in the morning, then it was 1 in the morning to try and make that deadline, because I had to have the adrenaline of the deadline to actually get the work done. Wow. And I mean, I couldn't do it. And one of my last jobs, I was supposed to be writing to menopausal women about supplements or something, trying to sell them supplements. And the my client said to me, I love your other work, but you sound like this really snarky 12-year-old. I'm talking to menopausal women here.
That's hilarious.
And that was because who I was, my real voice, I just couldn't keep it down anymore. And that's
Yeah.
why I love writing for kids, because that is my true voice.
Yeah. You said I want to go back to some things you said, but you said at your book signing, your book launch, that you're eternally 11 years old. Like you were just always 11. And is
Yes,
that correct?
that's correct. And that's why it's so easy to write for that age group. I don't try and write for that age group. And actually, the reason for it is not as much fun, but I think that for me, I had a lot of traumatic things happen between the age of 13 and 18. And when trauma happens, I think you stay kind of stuck where you were before the trauma hit. And so I so easily write from that age because I remember it so clearly. It was the time that I was so much kind of most alive,
Yeah.
and I knew who I was, and I said who I was. And then, this whole chaos hit, and I mean, I think there's a chaotic part of just turning 13. So there is some of that for everyone. But when you combine that experience and the traumas, I just wasn't able to cope. And so when I could go back to that age, it just opened things up for me.
So that's because most people that listen to me and myself included, we have a lot of trauma in our past, in our backgrounds. And a lot of people do take the trauma and they use it to help others. So when did you start recognizing that there was this 11-year-old inside of you that was really, like you said, very close to your heart and soul? Like, I don't want to use words. I don't want to put words in your mouth. So I'm just going to use my words. And if they sound incorrect, just say, no, this is how it was for me. But when did you start recognizing this voice inside of you, that this was a very powerful part of you?
Well, once I realized I didn't want to write advertising copy anymore, then I kind of floundered for a while. Partly because my father, who I had been very close to, tried his whole life to get published and wasn't able to. So
Oh,
the idea to try and get published, first of all, I didn't want to be a failure.
yeah.
And I mean, he was actually successful in his career, but he kept trying to get published and had not had any success. And also there was this like ballsy thing. I'm like going to try and do something that my father couldn't. So there was a lot of other stuff going on around it. So I floundered for a while trying to figure out, I thought, well, I'll write for adults. So I started writing fiction for adults, and I just put myself to sleep.
That's hilarious.
And then it took me a while to realize that when I was going through college and, I studied creative writing, and what I was writing was in a younger age,
Mm.
about younger age people. And so once I started doing that, the whole world opened up.
Wow. So when you were floundering, were you still working in advertising as you were floundering and trying to figure it out?
Yes. Though actually, for a while, well, not for a while, I actually then went to art school. I went to Rhode Island School of Design, and I graduated. I got a second degree in illustration, because I thought, well, if I knew the storytelling, I knew that was a part of me, and I thought it might be easier to illustrate my stories instead of write them. But it turns out I really am a writer, and so it didn't, even though I'm very happy that I did that, because I think it gave me a lot of things that I use actually in my career, because I'm doing like a graphic novel now, and it's really helpful. But I was trying to get around the problem instead of just going through.
And that's what I was going to ask you about now that you just said that, because I think a lot of us do that. Why do you think you tried to get around the problem instead of going straight through it, to
Because
it?
it's too scary.
Yeah. So it's easier you say something amazing. Gennifer's author page on Amazon, read her about, because it was so, I read it one night and I was like, I just love this. And you said a quote that I actually brought into my next level living class just recently, and I quoted you. And I'm going to try to find it, and it may not be here because I don't have the Amazon up, but it was basically about you'd rather fail at something that do you remember what you say exactly? Otherwise, I can pull it up.
I would rather fail at something I really wanted to do than be successful at something I didn't. And
Yeah.
that was, the advertising, because I really did well in advertising. And, my husband and I laughed because when we got together, I was going to be a creative director, which is the next step above a copywriter. And creative directors make a lot of money, so he thought he had a really good find here.
And then, so how long did so the floundering, were you working in advertising when you were going to the School of Rhode Island, or did you leave advertising and say, okay, I'm going to go get my graduate degree? How did you do that?
Well, yes, I actually did both. I'm not at RISD, but I started out at Art Center because I was living in LA. And so I went to Art Center, and I also wrote freelance advertising.
Okay, great. Okay, so when did what do you have a moment where like you found this 11-year-old voice and you were like, that's it? Like you said yourself, like once you started writing it, it just felt really good. Do you have a moment that you remember when you felt her?
Well, it was a little longer story, so I guess I have to tell the whole thing. While I was in art school, I wrote my first picture book, which was, let's see.
And for those of you on YouTube, you're going to be able to see all of this.
Yeah. So this was my first picture book, and I
Moonstruck?
wrote and illustrated this dummy at at RISD, and then it sold, which usually it takes a really long time to get a first book sold, but this one sold pretty easily. But they just wanted the text; they didn't want my illustrations, which was, I think, the universe saying, "Okay, this direction, not that direction."
Yeah.
So I hadn't really come to the realization that I'm 11 inside. I was writing in this picture book. And so, but the picture book was great because it took a really long time to come out, which is typical for picture books because you have to get an illustrator and they have a big queue and it just takes a really long time. But because I had gotten this sense that maybe I can do this, I had gotten an offer, something that my father had never been able to do. I got a book offer. And so with that encouragement, I was able to kind of work more on, I believed that I could maybe do a second book, that maybe this might be possible. So I started exploring doing other things besides picture books. And it took a while. I had to write a couple novels that were terrible before I got to one that was good.
So that's what I wanted to ask you next. So I don't want you to have to tell us your age, but around what era in your life was this all happening for you? Was it in the 30s or 40s or?
I was at RISD from in my age 30 to 32.
Oh, okay, so you've kind of figured it out pretty early, but it seems like our late 20s is that's when I left MTV in production. We kind of figure out, wait, what am I doing? The soul sucking thing. That's
Yes.
great. And your husband was supportive of this, right?
Well, it's very funny because when I started writing, because this is a picture book, and
Yeah.
I started writing novels because I'm basically 11 novels, middle grade novels. So novels for anywhere between third and seventh grade. Sometimes you do the younger end, sometimes you do the older end. And I actually think that, and we talk about this, that neither one of us really thought that I was ever going to get a novel published. Um, but I couldn't not do it.
Mm.
And he was supportive. And if he hadn't been supportive, I don't know if this would have all happened. Because he started to make some money. And so he was supporting us for a while. I have to say that later in our lives, I was the biggest breadwinner. So it went back and forth. It wasn't that I just, used him my whole life.
Yeah.
I actually have made money at this. And so I think it came back to him that
Yeah.
he trusted me and that he thought she has to do this and I love her.
Yeah, that's nice. And
Yeah.
you said something really important. You said you just had to do this.
Yeah.
So what were the first novels that you wrote after the picture book? Did they get published?
No, and actually the second novel I wrote, I got an offer to publish it, and by then I had an agent. By then I'd already had a book come out, and my agent said, "Don't take the offer,"
Oh, wow.
because I had gotten so much better, and it wasn't going to help my career to have that second book published. The first one I didn't get an offer for. It was a fantasy, and I sent it out. I got some interest, but today I would never ever publish it. There's something really important about building your skill set. And people don't realize it actually takes time. You think, oh, I've read a million novels, I can write one. Well, it turns out you got to just keep working on it and keep upping your skill level slowly. Now I feel like almost any idea I can come up with, I can write. But that wasn't true when I started out. I had a very limited range of what I could actually pull off.
Yeah. And how many books have you written? This is
The one that's coming out in September will be my 19th.
Yeah, 19th book. So when you didn't get an offer for the first novel, did you get discouraged, or were you just kind of on this like track where you're like, no, I just got to keep going, keep going? What was going on with you personally?
Well, I kept saying to myself, I'm just doing this for a little while, and then I'm going to get my illustration portfolio in order, because I had just gotten this degree in illustration.
Right.
But I couldn't get myself to do that. I have another idea. I just always have another idea. And so I just kept at it.
That's great. Okay, so your agent told you not to take the offer because you've gotten better. So then what was the next book that got published?
So by then, actually, when she told me not to take it, I'd already had a book published, and that was Notes from a Liar and Her Dog. And the thing that was interesting about Notes from a Liar and Her Dog is that before that, I would go to these seminars and they would tell me what's selling right now. And I would say, I can write that. And I would try and write to the market. And then for whatever reason, for what I did with Notes from a Liar and Her Dog is I forgot all that. And I tried to write the deepest novel that I could.
Mm.
And that's what sold.
What novel was that?
Notes from a Liar and Her Dog.
Okay, that's the one that was the deep one. Now, that's not young adult, is it?
No, it's all middle grade. Young adult would require me to be 13, 14, 15, and I'm not.
Right. Okay. All right. So then when did you write Al Capone Does My Shirts?
So actually, when I got the idea for Al Capone Does My Shirts, Notes from a Liar and a Dog had not been sold yet. Because there's a long time of research, especially if you're doing historical fiction. Yeah, it takes a long time to write. So I had already gotten the idea to write Al Capone Does My Shirts. And one of the motivations for it is that I thought, well, this is a really unusual idea. It's basically takes place on Alcatraz in 1935, when the kids actually lived there because their fathers were guards. And if you've ever been to Alcatraz, it's a very small area. And this idea that you would grow up with all these infamous bad guys in the cell house up top really was wild. And I thought, this is an unusual idea, and maybe I can get the attention of those New York editors with it. So I'd already started researching it. I like to volunteer as part of my research process. So I volunteered on Alcatraz. I interviewed everybody I could. So I had already started that process when Notes from a Liar and Her Dog sold.
Okay, I'm curious. So I'm gonna go back to the first novel because I want to. So how do you say that the title? Because I think I'm Notes from a Liar and Her Dog.
Yeah, Notes from a Liar and Her Dog. As you know, I love dogs, and you love dogs too. So that's one of the the things that we talk about.
So that particular book you said, so Gennifer and I both have shepherds, and so we talk about dogs all the time. And I once asked Gennifer, what do you like? Because I don't go into San Francisco, and she knows this. And I once asked Gennifer, what do you like about San Francisco? And she was like, what do you like about German Shepherds? It's the same thing. It's just amazing and fun. And I can't remember exactly what you said, but it was like, I just love it. I'm always discovering things. And I think that's why I like being around you so much, because you have such an inquisitive perspective. Like, I feel like you, even on the tennis court, you come on, I know I'm changing subjects and I do that a lot, but I'll go back to the question. You come on the tennis court and you're very inquisitive. And I think that's part of you being a writer, don't you? Agree?
It certainly helps. You have to be curious. You have to be curious if you're a writer.
And were you always curious?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So going back to Notes from a Liar and Her Dog, you said that was a very deep novel. What made that very deep for you?
That's a very hard question to answer, because you think most people's first successful novel or first novel that they write is very autobiographical.
Mm-hmm.
And this one wasn't at all. And
Okay.
people that know me did not think the main character was like me in any way. I mean, that grew up with me. I mean, this wasn't, and yet it felt so intense. And the main character was very difficult, and I tried to show why she was and what circumstances made it so hard for her. But that's not an easy assignment. People like to read protagonists where they identify and they feel they're kind of a better self than they are.
Yeah. So what made you write her?
Well, it
Characters
just
come
came
to you.
out. I
Yeah.
don't know. I mean, I couldn't sleep one night and I started writing in her voice, and her voice was so strong. And I don't know, I guess she's my alter ego or something, because I try and get along. I'm not like a really push myself through kind of person, but and so I don't know, it felt really good to be her.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I love what you wrote in I bought her book, Hank Cooperman, and she wrote in to one of the gutsiest people I know. And I was like, I love that. Thank you. So I'm one of those people that pushes
You
through.
are. You're more like Aunt, the main character, than I am. Yeah,
I love that. So let's go to Al Capone does my shirts. So you had Notes from a Liar and a Dog, and then how many, because that was that the novel Al Capone Does My Shirt that kind of put you on the map, Gennifer?
absolutely.
Okay. So how many books before that?
Well, just the picture book, Notes from a Lion or Dog, and then Al Capone Does My Shirts.
That's amazing. Okay, so tell me a little bit. So you did all this research, which sounds phenomenal, and then you started writing the book?
I did a lot of research, and that actually had an autobiographical component. I mean, I wasn't alive in 1935. It was very different than my life, but the relationship between Moose, the main character, and Natalie, the character who today would be on the spectrum, but the concept of autism didn't exist in 1935. So that relationship really reminded me of my brother's relationship with my sister who had autism. So it was it was challenging to write, because it's one thing to write a book that takes place on Alcatraz, but then you've got all these other aspects, and then you have to research what people who displayed the characteristics of autism, how they were treated in 1935, and what might have happened, and it was quite challenging.
Wow. So was that something that just again woke you up and you came to you? How did that story come to you?
I saw an article in the paper, the Chronicle, about the Alcatraz Alumni Association, which existed, and I was a honorary member for years, but now the people have gotten too old, so it doesn't really exist anymore. But it's every year they would meet, people who had been guards on the island, people who had grown up on the island, and people who had been criminals, incarcerated prisoners on the island. And they have this big picnic.
Wow.
And so I just thought, wow, that is so weird. And the idea, sometimes an idea you just know is right. And I knew I was going to do that. And that was going to be a good book.
And then, so when you started, did you know the characters when you started researching, or did you start researching and then the characters came to you?
I started researching first. The
Okay.
only character that is based on research is, of course, Al Capone, because he was on the island and he did work in the laundry.
Right. And he actually did people's shirts, you said.
Yeah, he did the laundry for anybody who lived on the island. So your laundry, you would put it out in a bag, and the convicts would pick it up, put it in the truck, and then they would launder it.
That's amazing. Okay. So when you published that book, what was it like when you started getting recognition for it? How was that for you?
It was wild. In my field, they do things like you do a lot of public speaking, a lot of speaking in schools. And, I had done a little bit with Notes from a Lion or Dog, but, not very much. And all of a sudden it got on the radar and I got deluged with offers to speak and do this and do that. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm just a little writer. What is going on? And so, I mean, it was very exciting, but it was over the top. And I remember my kids were kind of the award that's really important in my field is the Newbery or the Newbery Honor. And when I got the Newbery Honor, all of a sudden I got like all these flowers appeared and and now it's like really freaked out my kids, like, what is going on? Why is mom getting all these flowers?
Wow. And did it mess with you at all to have that kind of success when you were getting to write like another novel or?
Well, what I always say, and I think is really true, as a kid, I worked hard and I did well at things, but I wasn't like a superstar in what I wanted to be. And which at that point was I wanted to ride horses in the Olympics. And so the best award I got was the Good Sportsmanship Award, which is kind of the award they give to good kids that don't do that well.
Yeah.
So, there had been talk that maybe there might be an honor book or a Newbery Award winner. But I just thought they don't know me. I'm just not that kind of person who wins those awards. And so when I actually did get an honor, it changed my perception of myself in really, I think, a good way.
So how long after you probably may not remember these specifics. How long after the book was published did you get that award?
Well, what happens is the awards are announced in January of the next year. So, so I won a Newbery Honor in 2005, but the book came out in 2004. And
Right.
that's just the way it works.
And then do you have to go there and receive the award and talk? Do like an acceptance speech?
Well, you definitely go and receive it, and that's a big deal. I won the honor, which isn't the gold. The gold person has to do a big speech, an hour speech. I
Mhm.
just kind of could walk up and get it, which was
Okay.
perfect.
That's great. And then so they became a series. Was it a series when you first sold the book or was it a series after?
It was not a series when I first sold the book, but while I was writing it, I realized how much material was in there.
Mm.
While I was researching, there was just so much, and I had to really winnow it down and not include it in the book. So that made me feel like I could actually write more books about it,
And
about the subject matter.
did you tell your agent that then? Did you say to your agent, I have more, and then they, that's how you work the process of pitching it?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't decide to write a second book until after it won an honor.
Okay.
I wrote another book. I've always liked to write other books in between the Alcatraz books, because as much as I am fascinated by the place, I need to come at it in a fresh way. And if I just keep writing one after the other, I don't feel fresh about it. And so and the way to get out my head out of it is to really get my head into researching for something different.
Yeah, great. I want to ask you because your writer's life really fascinates me. But before I do that, there's one question that's coming to me, and I want to know when you got the letter, or did you get a call or a letter that your first book was published, or how did you find out the first book was published?
The very first one, I
Yeah.
got a letter.
How did it make you feel when you opened that letter?
You know, it was a game changer, because I had been sort of hoping maybe I could do this, but the fact that someone said, yes, we're going to publish this made me feel like, oh, maybe I really can do this. It gave me the confidence to spend the next 7 years working on my skills, which is really what happened.
Yeah, but it didn't take that long to publish that particular book. It was just the 7 years of all the books that you were doing. Is that correct?
No, it
Okay.
took, I got the offer in 1992. It came out in 1997.
Oh,
So
so
it
it
did
did take a
take
while.
7 years, but I did not, I immediately wrote a bunch of other books that didn't sell.
Why?
Well, I personally, again, I believe that the universe sort of tells you things and that you have to kind of listen. And so I wrote a lot of picture books, and I think I am not, even though I have written about 5 picture books that have been published, I think that's not really my natural place. And so I wrote a lot of picture books, and then I wasn't quite ready. My skill set as a novelist wasn't there yet.
Right. But so I want to understand this because this is fascinating to me. And of course, we all believe the universe helps us on this podcast. So this is a perfect place to talk about it. So it's Moonstruck, right? Is that the name?
Yeah.
Moonstruck, you got, that was the first not book that was published. You got
Right.
the letter that it was going to be published, but you wrote other books before you actually put that one out?
Right, because what happens is, as I said earlier, there's a long queue. And
Oh,
so they get an illustrator. The illustrator has 3 other books to do first. It just takes a really long time. It's a slow, old-fashioned industry.
yeah. Okay, so then you must have wrote A Dog and a Liar in between that stage then. Is that correct?
No, I wrote a lot of books that didn't, the novels that didn't get published, a lot of stuff. I mean, it did not look good for me.
I was going to say, did you get discouraged?
Oh yeah, but and I am very stubborn. And sometimes that works to my advantage and sometimes it doesn't.
Well, I think that's why I'm asking you this, because why I'm asking this is because people get discouraged and they stop.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I went back to this point without knowing this part of the story. I don't know a lot of the story, which is so fascinating to me because I'm really like, what does it make? Because people stop before the dream's about to happen, like right before. And I really want to encourage people not to do that because then they just are disappointed and waiting. So I'm curious, like you say you're stubborn, but was there anything else that made you keep going?
Well, as I said before, I have really good work habits and that helps.
Yeah.
And I got used to in advertising, I would write, there were writing muscles. A lot of people can't write for 8 hours a day.
Mhm.
And it takes time to be able to build the muscles, be able to do that. So I had a lot of good background. And I really felt like it was the last house on the block for me. I knew that it was the right thing and I wasn't going to give up. And I am very grateful to the person I was back then that I didn't give up.
Yeah, and you said something really important, the last house on the block. And a lot of people that I talk to that are successful, there wasn't a plan B.
Right.
Like you already did plan B and you were exhausted. If I'm putting words in your mouth, just let me know you were exhausted from plan B and you were like, that's it.
Yeah, that's
So
it.
I love that you said that. Okay, so now I want to get into, we won't talk to you too much longer, but one of the things that really I told Gennifer, I went to her book launch and I just had a very intense session with my therapist right before that. And she asked me, are you being truthful with yourself? Are you being truthful with yourself? And then I went to your launch and I was so like, I just loved it. I loved hearing your story. I loved the whole experience of it and even the questions after. And what I realized by listening to you about your writer's life, the way you live your life, it's very much has been what I want in the future.
Mhm.
So it was such a moment of clarity for me, and I was so grateful, and I told you about it. I would love for you to share with people what your day is like and how you approach writing books, and then I'll ask questions about that because I think Gennifer, tell me if I know I throw a lot of questions in and just bear with me. You really love the life you created. Is that correct?
That is correct. Absolutely. I mean, I love to write. I love writing the books. There are other parts of my job because it is a job that I don't like as well as writing the books, and I still have to do them. So my treat is getting to write the books.
Yeah. Yeah.
So right now I'm still promoting the 10th mistake of Hank Huberman. I'm doing a lot of blog posts, etc. And those are fine. I don't mind doing them, but I trying to figure out the part of my day that's not going to be affected by that, and that I can really just work, because I'm working on a new book, of course, and that I can play around with it, because that's the fun.
Right. So describe to us a little bit about like what your schedule is, because you do have you're pretty good with your schedule and how you spend your time. And I know it's different from when you're promoting than when you're working full time. So if you could just share a little bit about that, that'd be great.
Okay, well, first I have to say that I'm getting a little long in the tooth. And so I prioritize physical activity more than even more than I used to, and I always have to some degree. And so ideally, a day is I get up really early and play tennis. And then at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day at 5:30, I go to a yoga at a studio for an hour. So I bookend the day with that. And I think it helps me write better, but I know it helps me be healthier. And I'm at the point where I got to stay healthy in order to have the things that I love. And what I love to do is what I'm doing. So that's a priority. So there's sometimes, I look at my email when I first sit down. I'm finished playing tennis. I sit down. It's usually about 9:15. I look at my email to see if there's something fires I have to put out. And then I kind of have this prioritized system in my head. And I try and figure out, okay, if I knock out all these blogs, then tomorrow I get the entire day to write.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
And I try and control that. But I also feel it's really important to keep your work. I know I talked about this at the book launch, to keep your work wet. And so you have to keep working on it every day, even if it's just for a little bit, because it just keeps things going. And I think a big part of the actual work is that it starts the wheels turning, and your muse starts working even when you're not working directly on it. And so it's really important to keep that going.
So let's take you right now. And I remember you saying that, which I loved. Right now, you're in the middle of promoting a book.
Yes.
Right. You have another book coming out in September that's already done, right? I'm assuming.
Yes, it's done.
Okay. And then you're writing another book right now.
Well, actually, I'm writing a book, and then my editor now I have two editors, and my editor for the 10th mistake of Hank Huberman has 5 ideas that I gave her for novels, and she's trying to figure out which one she wants me to do next. So that's happening. And as soon as that comes back, I'm probably going to have to put what I'm writing now a little bit on the back burner, because it isn't under contract yet. And I'm not quite sure, for a lot of different reasons, what I'm going to do with it. So, so I always have to do the bread and butter work first. And
Right.
also, we are probably going to do a third Dogtown. And so I have some ideas going for that, but I have that back burnered a little bit right now.
Right. Great. So this is perfect. I love this. So you're writing a book right now that's not under contract yet, which means you haven't sold it yet or pitched it, correct?
And I'm not ready to show anyone yet. That's key.
Do you want to talk about that, not being ready to show it yet?
Well, I think it's really important to protect yourself.
Yeah.
And when an idea is really new and unformed, like my daughter this morning said, well, what's it about? And I said, I'm not going to say, because people will kind of look at you like, or isn't that like so-and-so? Or they'll say something. And then all of a sudden you're just crushed. And it's so new that they're probably right about all those things. It just takes a while to develop an idea far enough that it can withstand the scrutiny.
It's so true. I'm reading so many books right now about self-help books, and he's like, go find somebody that you can share your dream with, your future self dream with. And I'm like, no, sorry, not yet.
Yeah.
Because people there's like 2 people that I know will always like support it. but people do make faces or say something they don't mean to, and it can really just shrivel your creativity up.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So you have to develop it far enough that it can withstand that.
Yes. I agree with that. I agree. Okay, so then the book so the editor would come back with one, and that's probably a book that's going to be under contract. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. And then talk about, so I want to talk about Dogtown really quick before we go, but before we do that, so you've set up your life like this.
Hmm.
How how does that feel to really have honored yourself and to set up a life that you love?
Well, I feel really fortunate because I really do love what I do. And I feel proud of what I created. And I feel like it's way more than anybody ever thought. I mean, I think that people underestimate me, and they have my whole life.
Mm.
And so I think people are really surprised.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about that because you talk about, it feels to me like you've had an intention. I'm going to say, for the back of a better word, a dream, just something you had to do, the last house on the block, and you honored it, and you didn't know what the results were going to be, but you just kept going.
Well, one thing that I feel is really important is that by honoring your dreams, you become more alive.
Mm.
And maybe the dreams, they won't come out exactly, I think this idea that you're going to make it exactly to this spot on the hill that's not the way it's going to work, because the universe intercedes, and you'll end up in a different place, but you become more alive by pursuing it. And that is, I think, really important to me anyway.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that so much. And that's why I ask people to go towards things and then surrender, because what the universe has in store for us is usually so much better than we can even imagine. And then it's the growth that we do.
Yeah, I've been surprised, especially recently. Things like came out of, like, I was going for this, and something came out over here that was just so much better than I would have imagined.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so glad you're sharing all this, because I think when I was talking to a client yesterday and she wrote me a note after, and she's like, "Thank you. You gave me hope again." And I think one of the hardest things is when we fall into those moments of hopelessness or feeling hopeless. And so I feel like it's very important to talk to people like you so that I can inspire hope in people so that they reignite their dreams. Because Jennifer, go ahead, say something to that.
Well, yes, I agree, but hope can be very painful.
Talk about that.
If you have figured out that the only thing that's going to satisfy you is, an Academy Award for Best Actress. And let's say you haven't acted in a really long time. And if that's the only thing, and that's what you're going to hope and hope and hope, well, what if, like, just being in a production is just so wonderful? I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't hope for things. I'm just saying that, hope can be a trap too. you know, it's like, hope for make small steps every day rather than, I've got to do this. I mean, it's a mean thing to do to yourself, I think.
No, I agree with you 1,000%. And I'm glad that you clarified that, because my whole idea is that do it with surrender. Like it's like you said, I have a dream, and then I surrender, and then I just do the microcosm steps towards it, because I have no idea what's going to show up.
Right.
And I agree with you about that.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that I'm glad I don't define hope in that way, but we all define, somebody may be defining hope in that way.
Yeah.
And it might be an attachment that is not a healthy attachment.
Right.
So I'm so glad you said that, because that's what I think stops people. They're so afraid of being disappointed
Right.
that they
And
don't do it at
if
all.
the only thing is to be president of the United States, they probably will be disappointed. There's, but maybe what's really going to make you excited is, public speaking about what it is that you feel, why you want to be president, or what you think can be changed, or be a part of something, or, it's just, it's a much bigger world. And so I think hope for just one thing can really be problematic.
No, I agree with that. So taking it back then to you, was your focus, I know that it shifts and changes, so we're saying it in that context, but am I wrong to say that what you held close to your heart was just, I just want to write?
Well, I love writing. I
Okay.
mean, I remember hearing someone speak, and I'm sorry, I don't remember who it was, and they were talking about how everybody wants to get that big book, but as soon as they get that big book, they're going to need to do another one.
Yeah.
And if you don't like that process of writing, I mean, why would you want to do it?
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, I know that there are successful writers who don't like to write, but I just am not one of them, and I don't want to be one of them.
I love that. I don't know if you ever saw Elizabeth Gilbert's TED Talk, um, um after Eat, Pray, Love.
Yeah,
And she speaks about that, like this book just went off and she had to because then everybody's waiting for the next big
right,
thing.
right.
She gives this incredible TED Talk all around that, about that,
Yeah.
and continues to write. So it's great. Okay. The
And,
last.
and that's why when I write, I create this big wall all around myself
Ooh, tell us about that.
because it's just for me and it's not for all those people. And that's really important that you're just writing for yourself. For me, I try and make myself laugh and I try and make myself cry while I'm writing. That would be a good day.
Wow. I've never heard that before, because I've heard from writers who say they're always like focused on the person who is going to read it, and that's who they're writing for.
Well, everybody has different ways, and
Right.
whatever works for them. I don't have to, I don't have any judgment on how you do it. This is how I do it.
Yeah, no, that's why I like hearing that perspective, because I've never heard that. It's great. Are you writing for the younger you?
I'm writing from the younger me. I
Okay.
don't know if I'm writing for them. I mean, I do think, I know with Al Capone Does My Shirts, I really struggled with being a sibling of a really severe, someone with very severe autism. There's a spectrum, and she was about as severe as you could get. No one had ever heard of it. And the sibling thing didn't exist. And I had all these confusing feelings. And so I feel like I wrote that book for younger me in some ways, so that a kid out there will say, oh, yeah, it's normal to feel this way. It's normal to, love her and also feel really resentful and jealous and all those things.
That's great. That's great. How many years between you and your sister and your brother?
Um, I'm the youngest of four. My oldest sister is 7 years. Then my brother is 5 years, 5.5 years, and then my sister is 3 years. I'm the youngest.
Okay. I was just curious. Okay, great. All right. Last story. And thank you so much for all your time. And I really appreciate it, because this is so good. Just tell the story about how you came to write Dogtown, if you are okay with
Dogtown. Well, I Catherine Applegate and I are friends, and I mean, we weren't close friends, but we were both in this writers group, and every now and then we would have lunch. And when we would have lunch, the subjects of co-authoring a book would come up, because there's a couple of co-authored books that we both really like, and so we would talk about them. And it happened more than once. I think it might have happened 3 times. And after a while, I was like, I didn't feel like I was bringing it up. I felt like she was bringing it up. And so I thought, well, I wonder if she's hinting. But Catherine Applegate I mean, I'm very proud of my career, but Catherine Applegate is huge. And so for me to ask Catherine Applegate if you wanted to co-write a book, it was a little ballsy. But I thought, she's the one bringing it up. So I thought, what, I'm just going to ask her. So I emailed her, and she said, yeah.
it. Did it take long to get a response from that email?
No,
Okay. Okay.
no, she was really up for it. And, later she said it was my idea and I said it was her idea. And then we laugh and we tell the story. So I don't know. She says, well, I'm from the Midwest, and we don't say things directly.
That's great. And you have a third book. The second book, what's the title of the second book coming out in September?
Mouse and His Dog.
Mouse
It's
and
the
His Dog.
Dogtown book. And then the third one, we're still working on. We don't have a title for it yet.
Okay, great. Wow, you're writing a lot of books right now.
Yeah, it's fun.
Good. Okay, is there anything that you would like to say for I get so many people, Gennifer, that want to write books that they're just waiting. And I don't know what they're waiting for, but they're not doing it. And I'm sure everybody's reason is different. Is there any kind of advice or anything you would say to them?
Well, first, I would say be kind to yourself.
Mm.
If you beat yourself up, you're not going to want to write. And the second thing is to try and do just a tiny bit, even if it's 5 minutes every day, because that 5 minutes gives you courage and it makes you feel like, oh, I'm actually doing something. And then, maybe you can find a little more than 5 minutes. But the other thing is to read a lot and find the books that really you think, oh, I wish I could write a book like this, because it inspires you to feel like, oh, maybe I could. And so
That's great. I also have to say, I'm going to go back to what you said about the room around you.
mhm,
I think that I see a lot of people that they're worried about the rejection or whatever, what's going to happen in the result, that hope that you talked about. So if
mhm.
they just write for themselves, that's probably going to even be better too, as well.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, there are some people that write for like their self when they were in third grade, or they write for a kid they know, or that there's lots of different of ways of doing it. So there isn't just one way. But
Mhm.
for me, I have to really not get a lot of opinions when I'm starting, and just try and please myself.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you so much. Where is the best place for people to follow you? Or, of course, a lot of people are parents and have children of the age that you said it's between 8 years old and 11 years old, your books?
Yeah, most of them.
Okay.
The 10th Mistake of Hank Huberman is more 10 to 13. Dogtown, I would say, is more 7 to 11.
Great. And adults too, because I read some of her books. So I'm going to just tell you that. And I know other adults who read her books. Is it your website is jennifercholdenko.com. It's going to be in the show notes. So you could spell her name. And then
Mhm.
what social media channels are the best for them to follow you?
I'm on Twitter and Facebook, and I'm kind of new on Instagram, but I'm there also.
Great. And it's under your name?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we'll make sure that those things are in the show notes. Thank you so much. I really,
Thank
really,
you.
yeah.
Okay. It's great
Yeah.
talking to you.
You too. Thank you.
All
Thank you.
right.
Thank you everyone for listening. And just remember to rate, review, subscribe, and share this podcast. And as I always say, who can it be now? It's you. It's always you. Have an incredible day or night whenever you're listening to this. And thank you so much.